I've always believed that you can't fail if you tried, because so much of the hurdle in life is just saying yes or just pursuing something. And a lot of times we let fear or the possibility of rejection prevent us from even trying. And how can you grow or learn if you do that? And so while I'm not good at everything, and while I certainly have had my share of rejection in my career, I've never had a fear of trying. I've never had a fear of failing. Let's say tomorrow I try to do a Broadway show and, it opens and closes the same day. That won't feel great, but I won't feel like I failed because I at least tried, at least did it.
Hello, welcome to Theater Life Uncensored, where we peel back the curtain and reveal to you what's really working in today's industry for theater artists just like you. I'm your host, Jim Cooney, a New York City director-choreographer, and I'm also the founder of Amplified Artists, a membership community for theater professionals helping you create a career and life you love. So today, I am talking to a dear friend of mine, Tony-winning producer Rashad V. Chambers, who's also a talent manager and lawyer. He produced the Tony-winning revival of Topdog, Underdog, as well as Fat Ham, The Music Man, Ain't Too Proud, American Son, the list goes on and on. He's also the founder and president of Esquire Entertainment, which is a talent management firm, and they also do production and producing. And he's also a founding member of the Industry Standard Group, which promotes diversity by increasing the amount of BIPOC investors and producers. Now, he's also involved in many other organizations, and you'll hear about some of those on today's episode. So we've had a lot of performers on this podcast, as well as a handful of directors and choreographers, but Rashad is the very first producer we've had on. And now, I always think that knowledge is power, so I wanted to have Rashad on to help demystify for you what a producer actually does, because we all have a good handle on what a performer does and what the role of a director is and how a costume designer works. But producers are that elusive little bit at the top of the marquee that people don't fully understand what they do. And sometimes there's a negative connotation to them, or that they just care about money, or they don't care about the art that they're making. And so I wanted to talk about that today, because without a producer, art doesn't get made. And there are producers like Rashad and many others who do care about the art, and that they do care about the artists that they work with. So I thought giving you this inside look would help you better understand how helpful producers are and how we need them, and how it can be joyful and a creatively fulfilling and enriching experience to collaborate with them and to work with them, and how you also can best be supported by them. Now, if you also want to raise money for your own projects, even if it's something small like your own one-person show, or you want to be involved with an arts organization or sit on a board at one, or have a board for your own artistic pursuits, this episode will be really helpful to you. Now, speaking of taking help, I really want to help you. That is why I do this podcast. But there is a difference of just coming here and listening or watching these episodes versus actually taking action. You can't just show up. You actually have to do the work. And if you're like me, you want to work smarter, not harder. You want to do the smallest amount of work possible to get the biggest amount of results and the biggest amount of rewards. So let me help you do that. Let me help shortcut you right to your dream career by giving you a free copy of a resource I created called Dream Career Blueprint. And it shows you exactly how to construct your career based on the advice of countless industry experts. These are artistic directors, producers, casting directors, agents, all people I work with when I'm casting my own projects or that I teach alongside. And so I hear countless times again and again and again, what they say is, what they're looking for in the people they hire and what draws their eye and what convinces someone to give you the job. And so I've compiled all of that for you so you can just do exactly as they say. Now, to get your free copy of the Dream Career Blueprint, just go to the show notes and click the link to it that's right there. Also, if you don't want to miss any episodes of the show, hit the subscribe and get notified button so you're the first to know when the next episode is released. And if you want to connect with me outside of this episode, you can find me on Instagram. I'm at Jim Cooney NYC, so you can pop on over there and say hello. All right, so here is my conversation with Rashad V. Chambers. Hello, Rashad. Thank you so much for being here. I'm very excited to have you on the show and to talk to you today. And it's going to be a great conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. We always start by just letting people explain how they describe themselves as an artist, especially someone like you who does so many different things. I think it'll be great for people to hear how you break it down.
Can I break down all of them, even if they're not artist-like? So I am a lawyer, a producer, a talent manager, and a general manager.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll give more about that as we go through the interview here to expand on all of those. Well, so for anyone who doesn't know, Rashad and I are friends from a very long time ago. This is totally our relationship. I'm like the talker, and he's like the one line answer.
I'm
um,
not doing it for you.
what'd you say?
I'm not doing your job for you.
Oh yeah. So talk to us about your trajectory, because I've seen you go from when you first moved to the city and you started just being a lawyer, and then you moved into talent management, and then you moved in producing, and now you are a Tony-winning Broadway producer. So talk to us about that trajectory from when you started to now, and like how all those dots connected.
Sure. So, I started out as a lawyer. I went to law school and got my MBA. All the while knowing that my ultimate goal was to be a Broadway producer. And so I studied theater as a hobby. I studied it independently. Even going back to college, I would go to the library for 4 or 5 hours. I'd do my econ and then go and read a scene from Fences. I come back and do my statistics and then go read a scene from Gypsy. So it's always sort of been a part of my journey, just really studying theater and really understanding the craft of this industry. When I knew I started learning about producing just from seeing shows and kind of going through a little rabbit hole of like what they did, and I found that it would possibly infuse all the three things that I loved in one career. Being a business major in college, then going to law school and grad school for business, and then sort of studying theater. I thought, okay, I can carve out something really cool for myself. So I took a leap of faith and moved to New York to try to pursue a career in theater. I started out being a lawyer. I took the bar exam in New York and Connecticut, and then throughout my first year or so, I met a guy who was starting his own talent management company, and we really hit it off. And it just felt like I had a lot of transferable skills to do that. So I started in the management field and almost in tandem started producing. I I wanted to get some practical skills in that area, and found out that someone was doing Michael John LaCusa's The Wild Party for his thesis at Columbia for the MFA in directing program. And I just wrote to him blindly saying, I'm a lawyer. I want to be a producer. Can I work on this show? We met, hit it off. He invited me to work on the production. And that was the first time that I took sort of this idea in my mind to actually doing it. And I learned that I was actually good at it. Um, and then through that process, we ended up working on three more shows together. And I spent about 11 years developing new work, doing readings and off Broadway and concerts and anything that I can do to really learn the craft of producing and understanding how all the pieces came together. And through from 2018 until 22, I did 7 Broadway shows as a producer. And then in the spring of 23, I did my 8th Broadway show, which was with that same director that I worked with on The Wild Party in 2007. So 16 years later, we worked on a production called Fat Ham, which was my first time being a lead producer on Broadway. And it was his first time being a director on Broadway. So we both got to achieve first together. And that director is Sahim Ali, who is still a dear friend. And really, I credit him for giving me my start as a producer and, opening that door for me to be able to do what I do now.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, one thing that's so good about, I think why I'm drawn to you as a friend too, is because as I kind of joked at the beginning, like I'm the dramatic one. I'm like, oh, am I freaking out about whatever? And you're just like straight one word answers and just like, yeah, I just wanted to be a producer. So I just sent them an email and asked if I could do it. Like that's totally you. And I think that's such a good thing for people to hear is like we sometimes make these things out to be way bigger of a deal than they need to be. It literally could just be a simple email just saying, like you said, I'm a lawyer. I want to get into producing. Can we meet? And then that launched everything. And so I think it's a good lesson for people to take away from this is just keep it as simple as possible. It's something you keep telling me that, every time I reach out to you with some kind of conflict or whatever. And it's really helpful advice. And it's like something we just need to keep reminding ourselves that it's not that serious. It's something you say all the time. It's not that serious.
I think we often make things harder than they need to be. And some of that is fear. Some of it is, what they call it, gremlins in the life coaching world. We have these little things in the back of our mind that tell us that we can't do things or we're not good enough or I don't really have those. So it allows me to just kind of just move forward unapologetically. But what I've learned just from working with lots of different people from the business world, theater world, et cetera, is that, a lot of people try to anticipate the answers and you can't always do that. Sometimes you just have to try. And I've always believed that you can't fail if you tried because so much of the hurdle in life is just saying yes or just pursuing something. And a lot of times we let fear or the possibility of rejection prevent us from even trying. And how can you grow or learn if you do that? And so while I'm not good at everything, and while I certainly have had my share of rejection in my career, I've never had a fear of trying. I've never had a fear of failing because I've just always had people believe in me and I've always had people encouraging me. And so I know, let's say tomorrow I try to do a Broadway show and, it opens and closes the same day. That won't feel great, but I won't feel like I failed because I at least tried, at least did it, and I will have learned something from that experience. So that's just what I try to keep in the back of my mind whenever I'm pursuing something or when someone like you comes to me for advice. I really just try to be as objective as possible and sort of break down the scenarios so that everyone can have action steps and feel comfortable moving forward.
Yeah. Well, and the one story you shared is like, okay, I wrote to them and they said yes, but I know how many times you've submitted your scripts for things and tried to set up meetings with people and you got no's from those things. So it's not just this fairy tale that, oh, Rashad wrote to this one person, they said yes, and then the whole career is made. I mean, you send out a lot of emails, you do a lot of pitching. I know as a producer, you have to raise money, so you're constantly reaching out to people, and people don't see all the rejection that anyone
Right.
faces, but there is a lot of that. We just
Right.
hear about the one success story.
Or the journey. I mean, as just said a few minutes ago, I did my first show in 2007 and I didn't do my first Broadway show until 2018. So in the world that we live in now where everybody wants something immediately or people think about being an overnight success, that was 11 years of working and grinding and praying and hustling and not knowing how I was going to do it, not coming from a wealthy family, not coming from knowing any producers. It was really just me making relationships, networking, and really trying to do these smaller things that allowed people to see not only my work ethic but my work product to get to that goal. So if you want to really think about it, it took me 13 years to achieve my goal. And now luckily I'm able to do it a lot easier, and be able to have a lot more connections. But there aren't a lot of people that would stick around for 13 years. So I just want to highlight that because sometimes people only see the glory, but they don't see the story.
Hmm. Yeah, and all the effort.
Right.
So, just from because you have done a lot of reaching out to people, have you learned anything along the way of like this is more successful if you say this or if you don't say that? Like any tricks or tips you found that seem to work better now that you've been doing it so long?
Nothing specific in terms of the type of content. I will say that people can glean what type of person you are by the way you communicate. And a lot of that is email, um, simple things like sentence structure or proofing your emails. We're all guilty, especially now when everything's sort of on your iPhone and your sending emails while on the go, just know that that is a part of your brand and how you make impressions on people. And you don't want to make a bad first impression. So just trying to be mindful of how you communicate with people. Also, just giving people grace. You're reaching out to somebody who may not know you, and you, of course, want a response immediately. But some people don't have the bandwidth to respond immediately. Some people want to respond when they have the time to send you a well-written email. So that may take 24 or 48 hours. So I would say if you don't hear back from somebody, give them a few days and then follow up in a nice way, just saying, oh, hey, I just wanted to reach out again and follow up on this email. Sometimes people are a little aggressive, like they send an email Friday at 5 p.m. And then on Monday morning at 10 a.m., they're like, hey, I'm just checking in. It's like, okay, there was a whole weekend. You're not you don't have any demands on my time. So just trying to figure out that balance of like when to follow up to be, sort of assertive or aggressive without being annoying. And also just being mindful of how you communicate, making sure that you address people properly. If you don't know them, some people want to be addressed as like, dear Mr. or dear Ms. or whatever, or dear doctor, as opposed to like, hey, Jim, blah, 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 blah. If I've earned my place as a leader in this industry, you know how to communicate with me. So those would be my little
Mhm.
tidbits of just communication and how to do that effectively.
Yeah, that's helpful. We've talked the difference between a producer and, a creative producer and, especially TV as it, when you're a producer in TV, it's a totally different thing. But in theater, what do you see as the role as a producer? Like, what is your job? And also like, if you want to share the difference between, theater producing and then being a more of a creative producer in the theater and how that plays out in different ways.
Sure. So I look at it as there's, 4 or 5 different types of producers within the theater. At the very top level, you have the lead producer or the general partner. And if you ever go to a show and you look at that very top line, you'll usually see like either 1 to maybe 4 people there. I like to equate them to the CEO of the company. They're the ones that are hiring everyone. They're making all the decisions in terms of key art, when a press release goes out, who's on the team, whether that be the director or the marketing agency or the company manager, the stage manager, et cetera. They're making all of those decisions in addition to raising the money. So all of that responsibility goes to them. Also, the liability is with them. If the show is not doing well and they're running out of money, they either have to put that money in themselves or they have to go out and get a loan from somebody else to be able to keep the show afloat. But they are literally doing everything, and it can often be a 24/7 job when you have a show running specifically on Broadway. But they also have the power and they also are getting more money than other people. So that's sort of the top line. The lead producer or general partner is the boss. Then under that, you will have a co-producer, which is how I started out on Broadway. And your main responsibility is raising money. Once you do that, you really don't have to do anything else. Although for most shows, you're often invited to a monthly or bi-monthly co-producer meeting or marketing meeting that the team will have just to review ticket sales, to review upcoming events, etc. But the main focus of a co-producer is to raise money. So a lead producer may reach out to you and say, Jim, I'd love for you to join my show. We have 3 different levels that you can join. I'll give you the example for Fat Ham. You could either raise $400,000 or above, 250 to 399, or 125 to 249. So those are basically the 3 levels. And I would say, okay, Jim, I want you on a team. What do you think you can raise? And you say, okay, this is my first time. I want to be conservative, so I'm just going to raise $125,000. And I come to you and say, great, you can have this slot. It's $25,000 a unit, meaning that each investor who wants to come in, the minimum that they can put in is 25,000, and then you would have the task of getting at least 5 people to put in 25,000, or you can do a combination of whatever you want. You can get one person to do 75, another person to do 50, but at the bare minimum, you need 5 people to do 25 in order to reach your threshold to get your credit and be aligned with the slot that you have taken. And then in addition to those 2 roles, some shows will have an executive producer, and executive producer helps the lead producer run the day-to-day of the company. The executive producer is not responsible for raising money, but really helping with the oversight of the entire production. And I found that people hire an executive producer for one of 2 reasons. One, it may be that they have the show, they have an ability to raise all the money, but they don't really have the experience as a lead producer, and they don't maybe have all of the connections that are not necessary in the industry. So they may bring on an executive producer just to kind of help bridge the gap to say, oh, you have a great relationship with the theater owners, or you really understand how to do a marketing campaign for Broadway. I don't know how to do that. I only know how to do film, or I only know how to do Fortune 500 businesses. You may bring on an executive producer to help fill in that gap. And then another reason somebody may bring on an executive producer is because they have multiple shows at one time. So they can't be everywhere all at once. So they bring on somebody to help them just sort of help with the day to day. If you have 3 shows running on Broadway, that's a lot of meetings between the press meetings, the marketing meetings, the general management meetings, et cetera. So you may bring on an EP to help you. And then you have your associate producer, which can be somebody who comes on board and raises a smaller amount of money, depending on the show, or it can sometimes be the assistant to the lead producer, but they're doing so much work on a day-to-day basis that the producer gives them a sort of higher title. And then lastly, you will have a lot of times you'll just have an assistant to the producers. And that person is just helping with, anything that needs to be done, proofing things, sending emails, managing calendars, less fun things like getting Ubers and lunches, but necessary things to help the lead producer really be able to focus on his or her job.
Hmm.
And those are main levels of producing. And within that, there is a combination of both creative, working with directors and designers and really helping that vision come to life, in business, which means raising money, making sure that the show is staying within budget, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that's something that you do well. You do both those things, and I think there's other producers I know who are really great at the money side, and they don't maybe have the skills or the desire to be on the artistic side, and then there's people who just want to be on the creative side that don't really have the money raising skills. So it's good that you actually straddle both very well. Um,
Yeah, I started out more creative, and then I had to learn how to raise money as I started getting to the Broadway space. And it's a necessary evil. You can't do the show without money.
right.
So I'm still learning, but yes, I have managed to be able to do both.
Right. And so how do you for someone who's like, well, I want to produce my one person show or they have a smaller project or something, how do you go about getting the money for this and asking people?
By just asking. It starts off with friends or friends of friends or colleagues that you know. The one thing that I've learned is that everyone invests for different reasons, but oftentimes people invest because they're investing in you. So some people want to do a show because it has a big star. Some people do it because the subject matter resonates with them. But at the end of the day, they're also investing in you, understanding your vision and what you're passionate about. So I've learned that I need to do shows that mean something to me, because when I talk about them, people see how I respond to the material. They see how my eyes light up when I talk about it, and that makes them excited about being involved. Um, Ultimately, people want to know that you're being responsible with the money, that you have a plan, and that even if the show doesn't make money, that you've created a good experience for them. And
Mm.
so I've started with friends. By the time I started producing on Broadway, a lot of my friends from law school or business school were starting to be partners or directors. And so they had a little extra income to be able to invest in shows. And yeah, the biggest thing that I can say is, share your art with people. There are people who are watching you now, people who are supporting you that you don't even know about. And if you don't ask for what you need, you'll never know that. So
Right.
those are the couple of things that I've learned through fundraising.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think people watch us more than we know that they are, or more than we realize, or more than they tell us, because, you know, we don't walk around and just praise everyone that we see and everyone that we know, but we see what they're doing and we are impressed by it. But sometimes we just don't always verbalize that. And I know, like, the first time I had an agent for choreography, it was like they approached me and like they had known me and known my work, and I was just kind of surprised, like, oh wow, you really knew, like, you knew all this stuff. And I just, people are seeing more than we think that they are.
It's true, and this is a good time to mention that is a huge reason why you have to treat people well in this business. Um, I Who you see on your way up is who you will see on your way down. And it's such a small industry that people talk. I've had clients not get jobs because creatives have done, quote unquote background checks on them and got negative feedback. And regardless of whether it was a reality or perception, that person wasn't willing to take the risk. So it's really important to just navigate this business with kindness because everyone is talented. But if that person is even a little less talented, but a lot nicer, and I know they're not going to give me problems in the room, I'm going to hire the second best person just for my own peace of mind,
Mm.
as opposed to somebody who is amazing, but like really difficult to work with. 10 to 6 is a long time to be in a rehearsal room with somebody who's problematic. So just remembering that is so important. And again, allow your work to speak for itself, allow your kindness to speak for itself, and you'll be okay. I had um an executive at a really big music company reach out to me on Facebook out of the blue. I had never met him. And he's, "Oh, I've heard such great things about you. Can we get together? I'd love to learn more." And that was just so random. So it happens when you are aligned with purpose and kindness and hard work.
Hmm. Yeah, like, I couldn't agree more. If someone wanted to hire a producer, then, like, if they're like, okay, I'm not going to raise this money myself, I want to hire someone else to be in charge of that. How does someone go about hiring a producer? Like, if you're a writer or, a theater company that wants to get, have a producer come on board, like, what's the process for that?
Usually an email. It starts with some outreach and also being specific about what you need. Are you looking for a producer to help raise money? Are you looking for a producer to help get it to the next level? Do you have the money yourself, but you just need somebody that can, you know, do the checks and balances for you? Understanding exactly what you need is a big crucial step in it, but also just reaching out and also doing your research on who's the best producer for you. If you are doing this really amazing but gritty and dark type of piece, maybe the producer of Mamma Mia is not right for you, or vice versa. If you have this like really happy go lucky, 42nd Street type of show, maybe you don't want to have the producer that only produces like serious dramas. So just understanding sort of what you need and who's the right person to do that. Oftentimes when I get pitch shows, it's because they're looking for leadership. They're looking for somebody that can maybe raise some money. They're looking for somebody that maybe can help them get a production out of it, whether that's regional or off Broadway or some other sort of incubator. So just understanding what you need and who is the right fit for your show. would be logical first steps for me.
Yeah. So basically, the theme of today is that it's always just reaching out and asking the question.
Always, you can't do this alone.
Hmm.
You need other people, and it really does take a village to be able to bring something to fruition.
Yeah. This is something I talked about with Chris Catelli when he was on the podcast earlier this season of just like how collaborative of an art form this is. And so, yeah, we do need people. But I think your point is good too about being specific, because I know for at least from my point of view, a lot of people will reach out to me, wanting advice on something or help with something, and it's just like, "Can I pick your brain?" Or what? A very generic thing. Can we go get coffee? Because I want to talk to you about X, Y, Z, or whatever. And if I drill down a little bit and just say what specifically, and then they say that, I'm like, oh, well, I could just answer that in one sentence for you. Like, we don't need to go get coffee. Like, I can just tell you right now what the answer is. You can have it instantly. I
Right.
think it's going to save everyone time if you just are specific in your communication about what you're actually needing, because also that helps the person know whether they have the time to help you, or in your case as a producer, if they can take the project on or if they can raise the money for you. But I think being specific, even in that first communication, is a really good point.
Mhm.
Um, so I know you are involved, or you are a founding member of the Industry Standard Group, and you help train the next wave of producers, of BIPOC producers and investors. So I know you're already working on that as well. But for anyone who wants to become a producer, like what are some of the resources you would recommend, or how would they learn that? And then I do want to hear more about the Industry Standard Group too.
Yeah, there's a lot of new programs that are popping up for producers. First of all, I like reading. So when I was younger and just starting out, I read a book called From Options to Opening, which is by Donald Barber and is a great resource. I'm assuming maybe it's updated. I don't know. Maybe it's still the same one that I read 20 years ago. But it just tells you all aspects of theater, from like how to make a deal, example agreements, different phases of like different types of producing, all those things, which is great. And Donald also had another book called Producing Theater. So those are two great resources. There are a lot of different fellowships that have popped up through Theater Producers of Color to Black Theater Coalition, um, but also Resources Unlimited has different producing classes and seminars, in addition to the Commercial Theater Institute, which I think may be on a little hiatus right now. But those are all resources for people to learn about producing. Ken Davenport has a newsletter podcast that also talks about producing, where he sort of gives overview. And there's also a resource called The Business of Broadway that is led by three Broadway producers, and they do different seminars and newsletters as well. So there is a wealth of information out there. And then just reaching out to people who are doing what you want to do, and asking them for insight or asking them about their journey or process, I think is very helpful. Everyone's is different. There are many people who, this may be their second act. Maybe they were a real estate person or an actor or something first, and then they decided to transition into producing. There are some people who go to various programs. Columbia has a school for producing and general management. So just figuring out like what you want to do, and then figuring out that path, and the stepping stones will be beneficial. I really just learned on my own. I treated my 11 years of developing new work as an informal MFA, and I just met in with everyone I could. I would go to, back before CTI was like really popular, the Broadway League had a producer development program. So I joined that, and I would go to all of those seminars. And then I just started doing the work. I started like optioning plays and just collaborating with writers and directors to be able to sort of flesh those things out. So there's not really any right or wrong way of doing it, but you do really need to understand the craft of theater and how to do it, and being humble and realizing what your strengths are, and surrounding yourselves with people who may be able to teach you things that you don't know. And if you're like, I can't really raise money, but I can really break down the script and be able to put together a full team, then you go out and find a partner who can raise the money. Or if you're like, you know what, I can only raise money. I don't know anything about creativity, but I know what I like. Then the opposite, you partner with somebody who can be more of a creative mind for a project. So I think all of those things just sort of get you into the right lane in terms of being able to start producing.
Yeah, that's a really good point because I know you used to have or maybe you still do have your partner that you produced with, and I know other friends of mine that they're partnerships and or small groups like 3 or 4 people, and that's a good idea too. You don't have to do it all yourself.
Right.
Um, so and I know like with you reached out to someone for like when you got your start, and one thing I know about you is you're very good about helping the next generation. You always have interns with you and people that you're mentoring, and talk to us about the industry standard group and how you started that and the mission and whatnot.
Sure. So I was actually approached by some colleagues in the industry who I think a lot of them had worked on Hadestown, and all of them were people of color and have found that they were just navigating a lot of homogenous spaces. There just wasn't a lot of diversity. There weren't a lot of people of color. And after George Floyd was murdered, they wanted to do something as a way to change the landscape. So they called a handful of us, and 8 of us started on Zoom in the summer of 2020 to create this organization that would help lower the barriers to entry and be able to diversify commercial theater, specifically Broadway. So it was intended to be able to bring in more BIPOC investors and producers to be able to not only have more people working in the industry, but also being able to bring more diverse shows. So and it also allows us to have both accredited and non-accredited investors. Um, the SEC has guidelines on who can invest in a Broadway show. And they specifically mandate, for the most part, I'm trying to say this with a little wiggle room, but most Broadway shows require you to be an accredited investor. And that means that as an individual, you make at least $200,000, or as a couple, you collectively earn at least $300,000. You have $1 million in assets, and there's like a couple more, but most people sort of check those 2 boxes. Um, and it's because they feel like if you meet that criteria, you're a bit more savvy and you understand the risk of what investing in theater is. They're trying to avoid the scenario like in The Producers, if you've ever seen
Yeah.
that show where they were going after these rich old ladies and getting their life savings. And although they had the money, that was all the money they had. And so the SEC wants to protect investors so big bad producers won't take advantage of them. Um, and they don't really allow accredited investors, one, for that reason, to make sure that they understand what they're getting into. But then it also just creates a lot more paperwork for everyone to have them. So we're taking on that burden of the paperwork, and we're working with SEC lawyers to be able to raise money through both. And a lot of people can't afford $25,000 or even $5,000. So for non-accredited investors, you can become a member for as little as $500. And then for accredited investors, if you were like, oh, I have a little money, I want to, dip a little toe into this water, they can come on board for $5,000. And then collectively, as an institution, we will invest in a number of shows and be able to not only provide investment opportunities into the shows, but provide resources to educate people and also provide more networking opportunities for various people. So that was sort of the genesis of the company. We're still working on it. It's never been done before, so it's now been a little over 3 years, and we've raised a chunk of money, but we have a higher threshold to get to in order for the entity itself to be accredited to then invest in shows, which will allow us to take both accredited and non-accredited money.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love that.
Yeah, it's been really amazing to work with 7 other like-minded people, who we all have different skill sets. Theater is the nucleus, but some people are specializing in marketing and social media. Some are producing, some are, doing other things. But it's been really cool to do something that hasn't been done before and to try to change the landscape of commercial theater. And the buy-in that we've been able to get from a lot of the major leaders in the industry has been really, really cool. I was at a party last night, and one producer who was an early sort of advocate, um, has been telling everybody about the organization and trying to get people to donate. And so that has been nice to be able to have some pretty big fish support the mission and want to help amplify it.
Yeah. Well, especially when we talked earlier about, having an artistic producer or someone that's more on the creative side. If you want to tell stories of different kinds of people, you need to have producers of different kinds of people, right? So I think it's, we can do our work as directors and choreographers in the way we cast shows, and, theaters can hire different writers to come in and things, but ultimately it has to come from the top as well. And so I think it's really great that you're doing this and helping change all that, because I feel like that's the last domino that needs to be like knocked over so we can really like open up, because you see how much even just from the pandemic till now, all the kinds of shows we've had on Broadway that's like really just opened up their creativity and given new voices to people, and it's just been wonderful. So I'm excited that you're doing this. I think it's going to just keep making it better and better.
I hope so.
Yeah. So last thing I want to ask you about, I know you sit on boards for a few places too, like Houses on the Moon and the on Broadway performing training arts program, right? Is that I say it right? Yeah. Uh,
Well, Broad Performing Arts Training Program. Yes,
Performing arts
that's
training program. Yeah. And then just recently, at the time of this recording, at least, you got voted into the board of governors for the Broadway League too. So what is that like for sitting on a board? Do you feel like that's under the producer camp as well? And if someone wants to get involved in an arts organization, is this like the best way to do it is by sitting on a board, or what does that whole look like?
right. Yeah, it's a combination. I mean, there are people on boards of theaters and other arts institutions that have zero artistic ability. I mean, you really want to have various skill sets on a board because everybody is devoting their time to make the organization's mission come alive. I would say that I am probably on these boards because I'm a producer first. But I also use a little bit of my legal brain whenever there are certain agreements that need to be done, or if we get a volunteer lawyer, I may be the one that serves as a liaison between the organization and that particular lawyer. But ultimately, I love being on board because it's a way to give back, and it's a way to be able to help, just sort of amplify various organizations. Houses on the Moon is a theater company that, the mission is to amplify the unheard voice. And most of the work that we develop and produce has a sort of social justice slant to it. So it could be gun control, prison reform, and domestic violence, immigration, etc. And we not only do traditional shows in theaters, but we also do touring productions that go to prisons and jails and be able to just sort of share art with the community. And so I've been on the board for about 5 years, and I really love the mission of the organization. And so I'm using whatever sort of skill sets or connections that I have to be able to help the organization just maintain its corporate structure, to be able to um, raise money for the organization so that we can continue performing and producing work. And yeah, and just really being able to sort of hold up a mirror and allow people to learn, to change, to transform, which has been really cool. And then the On Broadway Performing Arts Training Program was created by Broadway veteran Rima Webb, and she just loved teaching. She loved being able to give back. And so she created this sort of conservatory program for kids ages like 5 to 17 to immerse them into the arts in terms of acting, singing, and dancing. And she's found that even the students who did not want to pursue a career in the arts, they benefited from the program greatly because it taught them how to communicate. It helped some of them who are very shy get out of their shells and be able to speak publicly, to make friends, to be able to articulate themselves more. And so that's been really great just to see how young kids have grown. And some of them want to pursue the arts, and she's helped some of them really learn the craft, some of them get agents, some of them be able to get those stepping stones to be able to train in order to sort of be able to learn and grow. So I think no matter what discipline you're in, you will have some viable skills that a board can benefit from, whether it's, you have a finance background, a theater background, a casting background, like all of those things are beneficial to the board. And the more diversity you have in skill sets, the better off the board is, because you get more perspectives, and ultimately everybody is working to make sure the theater or the organization is better or enhanced. And in terms of the Broadway League, I have no idea what I'm gonna getting myself into, but I love being a producer. I love the Broadway community. The Broadway League is sort of the governing body for producers, general managers, and presenters, those who own theaters around the country. And every day, the organization is working to, you know, create more theater, to work with the government on grants and initiatives for anything that impacts Broadway or New York or around the country. And so, in terms of trying to get theater back to where it was in 2019, to create more diversity, to create more equity, I'm very humbled to have been nominated and selected for this position, and I'm looking forward to working with some really amazing people in New York and around the country to be able to do this. And throughout the past 3 years, the Broadway League has been instrumental in helping to get New York back afloat. They lobbied to get this New York musical theater tax credit, which has really been critical for a lot of shows to be able to thrive. They were responsible in the legislation for the Save Our Stages grants that many
Mhm.
organizations, individuals receive. So it's just really important work that needs to be done. And I want the Broadway community to be better than when I entered it. And so if I can just have a small piece of that, that is what I will do for the next 3 years while I am on the board.
Yeah, that's amazing. As I think there's so many people that are in our generation that are, I mean, that's why I'm doing this podcast. It's like I think we're all trying to just make it better than it was when we entered it because we see the potential. And I don't know, maybe the pandemic just cracked things open a little bit so people could step back and reassess more. But it feels like things are shifting, especially as younger people, or more and more younger people are coming up through the ranks. I feel like it is starting to shift. Um, so yeah, that's exciting. I think too, like what you said about having a variety of voices, because I have some friends who've started, theater companies or dance companies, and they decided to form a board, and then other people who didn't. And the ones who form a board, I feel like even if they're not a nonprofit, but they just like a board of friends or advisors or whatever it is, it just seems to be a lot more successful because you do have all these different skill sets that can help you instead of like you trying to figure it out yourself. It's very much like what we talked about earlier with having producers or partners of producers and whatnot. So I think that's a good point for people to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it takes a village, like I said before, and just to be able to have somebody who knows law, somebody who knows business, somebody who knows theater, somebody who knows accounting, somebody who knows how to event planning, all of these things that you have to do. Like, imagine having all these smart people, but nobody knows how to put together an event. So then your one opportunity to raise money is a gala, and it's a disaster because it's just not organized properly. So just being able to have different perspectives in a room can really help. And if you're interested in being on a board, you should, reach out to organizations, get to know what they do, go to their events. That's how I started with Houses on the Moon. A friend invited me to just a cultivation event. I went, and really like the mission of the organization. And then they approached me about joining the board. So there are so many organizations, whether it's arts or not, who are looking for people who share the mission of the organization, people who want to make the organization better and who want to make some change. So I would say align yourselves with organizations that you're passionate about or who have missions that you're passionate about, and see if they're a good fit for you.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good advice for anything in the arts. Align with the things you're passionate about.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This was incredible information. Anything else that you feel like is important to talk about that we didn't touch on? I know I could talk to you forever because we didn't talk about you being a talent manager or any of these other things you do, but anything that you feel like is pressing that you want to say?
Um, I don't think so. I mean, I guess you have a lot of different types of artists that subscribe and listen to your podcast. Um, I guess the one thing that I would just close with is just remembering to enjoy the journey of it all. I think so many times um we focus on the end result and we don't think about the path to that result. So you have a lot of people who end up on Broadway miserable because because they expected some glittery, shiny thing. And it's sometimes it's the same thing that you had in community theater. It's just more money and more resources. But like if you enjoy the process of going to the audition or going to that regional gig or doing that workshop and really focus on the art, I think it just makes it more worthwhile and also balance. Find people in your life that are not in the arts, that don't care about you just when you're working on Broadway, that can they don't care who was nominated for a Tony. Like they're just like, I just want to know how you are. And I think the more you can do that, the more well-rounded you'll be and the better off you will be when you walk in the room. Because regardless of how great of an actor you think you are, people can feel that stress or desperation or whatever when you walk in a room. And I found out the more well-rounded you can be, the better an artist you can be because you've lived life. You've have other things to talk about just besides auditions and sides and breakdowns, all those things like a hockey game, like take a pottery class, like all of those things go into who you are as an artist. And your self-worth is not just about when you're working. And just remember that. Like, yeah, you need to work, you need to make money, but just remember that, along the journey, you have to find joy. You have to have joy in order to sustain this business. Otherwise, you're going to be burnt out and you're going to ultimately quit. So I would leave with those little tidbits because it's really important to check in with ourselves and remember, why are we doing this? Are we enjoying it? And it's okay if you moved here to be an actor and then 5 years in, you realize I'm not excited about this anymore. I don't feel the joy that I once felt. It's okay to do something else. It's okay to do casting. It's okay to do stage management or producing. The There's an ebb and flow to this world. And so you have to find what makes you tick and what makes you happy.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
My pleasure.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. And I will share your social media handles and stuff on the show notes for this so people can get in touch with you if they have questions or want to say hi. But thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Bye.
All right. Bye.
Well, there's not much more to say after Rashad's final thoughts other than I couldn't agree more. And if you're going to take one thing away from this episode, I really hope it's the confidence to reach out to the people you want to work with and just ask. Have a conversation. Start a conversation. But his parting words about finding the joy, that's just such a beautiful ribbon to tie up this episode in a bow. Now, before I say goodbye, don't forget to get your free copy of the Dream Career Blueprint so you can start putting all of this into action. And you can download your free copy just by clicking the link to it in the show notes. If you have any questions about today's episode, drop those in the comments below. I always respond to each one. or you can send me a DM or a message over on Instagram. Again, I'm at Jim Cooney NYC. If you liked today's episode, hit the like button because it really helps more people find out about it. And also be sure to subscribe and get notified of future episodes too. And if you really love this show, leaving a small tip is greatly appreciated. It helps cover the costs of producing this. And so there's a link in the show notes for you to leave a small tip if you choose. Remember, there is no one on the planet who is just like you. Stay true to the gifts you have and who you are. Thank you so very much for tuning in today. Now here's a little preview of next week's episode. I will see you then. Imperfect action is better than taking perfect inaction. And because that action is usually something we don't know how to do yet, because it's something we haven't done, that's why we are growing, it's something we don't know how to do, it's not going to be pretty when we take that action. It's going to be imperfect. Think about the first time you tried to sing a high C or do a double pirouette. It's going to be imperfect. And so that is why we are not motivated to take action and why we don't want to take the action. And so we just stay where we are, we stay stuck. Well, let's get you unstuck. Let's give you some tips and tricks where you love taking imperfect action so you can grow faster than you ever have before.